For today's webinar that we have scheduled as a part of our bi-monthly webinars conducted by Sri Devaraja's Academy of Higher Education Research, I request our Dean, Dr. P.N. Sriramulu sir, to deliver the welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Very good morning. The warm greetings from Devaraja's Medical College, affiliated college to the Devaraja's unit of Academy of Higher Education. And I welcome Dr. Sundaram as a guest speaker from the Malaysia. I am pleased to extend my warm welcome to Dr. Sundaram, a registrar of AIMST, University of Malaysia, and all the delegates from India and abroad. I also welcome our beloved Vice Chancellor, Dr. G. Pradeep Kumar, who takes keen interest in conducting the webinars and seminars and CME and the workshops and conferences, particularly on medical education, who promotes the curriculum related events in our institution at state and national level. And I also welcome our Pro-Chancellor, Dr. Raghuveer, and I welcome our Registrar, Dean AHS, and all the professors and other faculty members of Devaraja's Academy of Higher Education to this webinar. And I am sure the session will provide the inputs to all the educationists involved in this curriculum mapping in health professional education. And it will be definitely helpful to all the faculty and all the delegates and postgraduate students and others. Thank you, madam. And over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for always being a support for all the educational activities that the center conducts. Thank you so much. I now request our Professor of Pediatrics and member of University Center for Health Professions Education, a health professional educator par excellence, Dr. K.M.V. Prasad sir, to introduce our guest speaker. Prasad sir. Prasad sir.
Good morning, all. I am audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. There was a small technical glitch, so I had to run over to another computer here. Good morning, Dr. K.M. Sundaram, sir. Good morning to all the guests as well as the delegates who have joined this webinar organized by the University Center for Health Professions Education. In fact, it is a very apt as well as timely webinar because we are rapidly moving away from the traditional curricula that we used to have and going towards outcome-based education, as well as looking at choice-based credit system also implementation in various different programs that are being offered by the higher education institutes in India. Specifically for our academy, the challenge is dual in nature. NMC has brought out a competency-based medical education and To truly implement the competency-based medical education, one of the core activities that will require is curriculum mapping. Because at the end of the day, any institute which is doing a proper curriculum mapping of the curricula that the institute runs in its various programs, it is easy to look at the program implementation, program improvement, quality assurance in the various programs and courses that are being offered. So with this small background, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. K.M. Sundaram. Dr. Sundaram is an associate professor with a PhD in pharmaceutical chemistry from the Science University of Malaysia. He is the AIMST Academic Quality Assurance and Curriculum Committee's Deputy Chairman. So we will be listening from the extreme expert on this curriculum mapping and its activities. The AQAC, that is the Academic Quality Assurance and Curriculum Committee of AIMST, will discuss new program initiatives and curriculum development, as well as ensuring that the new curriculum adheres to the Malaysian qualification framework. Just for information of Dr. Sundaram sir, UGC also has come out with national framework for skills, as well as a draft education for national education framework, which is again OB oriented, and the way you are doing in the various levels, even UGC has brought out some of these frameworks, and it will be good to learn from you on implementation of that in our academy. He is also the co-director of AIMST University Center of Excellence for Learning and Teaching, that is COELT. Dr. Sundaram was appointed as the panel member of Malaysian Qualification Agency in 2018. And Malaysian Qualification Agency is the body which approves all the tertiary academic program in Malaysia. For all the delegates, it is similar to something what UGC does in India. That is what the Malaysian Qualification Agency does in Malaysia. He has 25 years of teaching experience and research in field of pharmaceutical chemistry. He has published numerous research articles in the field of pharmaceutical chemistry. He is a certified quality practitioner by SIRIM. SIRM is an acronym for Standard and Industrial Research Institute of Malaysia. It is a corporate organization owned wholly by Malaysian government under the Ministry of Finance Incorporated. It has been entrusted by the Malaysian government to be national organization for standards and quality, and as a promoter of technological excellence in Malaysian industry. Dr. Sundaram is also a qualified lead auditor by Exemplar Global Australia. He played an important role as the chairman of the University ISO Steering Committee to obtain ISO 9001-2015 Quality Management System certification for Faculty of Pharmacy and Research Management Center of the university. So in fact, if you look at the introduction, he is an national and international player of significance in Malaysia. He has been working with at the cutting edge technology of technology or curriculum implementation and its improvements in various things, and even looking at quality assurance and quality improvement activities. Currently, Dr. Sundaram serves as the registrar of AIMST University. This is in short about Dr. K.M. Sundaram. And over to you, sir, now for your talk.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. I mean, Malaysia now is about 2 o'clock. And I'm pretty sure that India now already 12 something, sir?
Yeah, 11:40, sir, to be precise.
Okay, so good morning. Good morning to everyone. And
good morning.
Yeah, thank you very much to the respected Vice Chancellor, sir, Pro Chancellor, sir, Registrar, of course, Dean, sir, and also not forgetting Prof. Vinuta, who's instrumental in getting me into this session today, and not forgetting all the professors and the participants for today's session. A lot of things has been going in my mind, how I supposed to conduct this session, because I believe that this will be a very much introduction rather than in-depth, because within 2 hours or so, we won't be able to get the details, but I will try my level best to give a glimpse of what the OB is all about, because in Malaysia, the Ministry of Education have implemented OBE since 2013. And that's about almost like 9 years now. Prior to that, we were more on normal, what do you call, the traditional way of teaching and all that. So we have actually emphasized that in 2013, and all the universities' new program, we have to follow the OBE syllabus, OBE curriculum. If you don't submit the OBE curriculum in terms of the assessment, in terms of the learning outcomes, the programs will not be accredited by the Malaysian Qualification Agency. I'm the panel of a Malaysian Qualification Agency. When I go for accreditation visit, the first thing we look at is that whether the university have fulfilled the requirement of having the syllabus or curriculum in an OBE format. I will share with all the participants today that how we are actually practicing in our country to suit the national agenda, but of course it can be expanded to the international level as well. But of course, you know, there will be variance in terms of the application of it, because I just found out that the Dean also mentioned that UGC also, you know, in India have incorporated a similar type of what do you call the outcome-based education and things like that. But it's okay, maybe later we can do a comparison, and then we can take whichever is best, and then maybe we can you know, use it for our benefit. So I think without a further ado, maybe my session today will be divided into three. The first one will be I will try to go back and you know, into the basic aspect of OBE, what is OBE, and how it's look like, how the framework look like when we implement the OBE system. And then the second part of it, I'll try to touch a little bit on how to develop the outcomes. You know, we have a various level of outcomes, and I will touch a little bit on that. And then finally, I will share how in AIMS University, we comply to the Malaysian Qualification Agency's requirement in implementing the OBE, what they call a system, to ensuring that, you know, we are fulfilling the requirement of the government agenda. Right. So without a further ado, let me allow me to share the screen.
You can share it.
Yeah. All right. Sorry. So able to see my screen, right?
Can you make it full screen, sir?
Yes. Fourth slide.
Sir? I think Sir is logged out by mistake. I will just get back to you.
I'm so sorry. I think
No
some
problem.
connection issues here.
Yeah.
So that is the disadvantage of having what you call an online session, because sometimes, you know, you'll be missing in action. You'll be wondering where's the people are, you know. So I'm really sorry because there's a disconnection in our building here because of the weather. So sometimes it happens. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. Am I able to see my screen, madam?
Yes, sir. If only you, yeah, that's it, sir. Right.
Now you can see.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Okay, so without further ado, allow me to take you all through with what I'm having to to say today. Well, we have a lot of different understanding about outcome-based education. Numerous studies have actually been reported in all part of the world how the outcome-based education being conducted. But just to take a glimpse of it, the outcome-based education is basically we are expecting the outcome as the output rather than the teacher-centric teaching. So normally, when we start the outcome-based education, we will have our outcome in our mind first before we draft the curriculum. So that is the main gist of outcome-based education. So they are taught and expect all learners and students to successfully achieve particular or sometimes minimum level of knowledge and abilities or attributes. So meaning to say that, gone are the days when we go to the classroom, we take or open up our slide, we teach, and then we are done. We go back and then we continue with our work. So nowadays, with the outcome-based education, we will not be able to do that because at the end of the session, you need to ensure the learners, especially the students, they achieve at least whatever outcome which has been intended to be achieved by the student with the during the beginning of the class itself. So that is why later on I will take you through before we draft the curriculum or to the level of getting the topics, then the topic outcome should be clearly spelled out before we go to the class. And the student need to know what they're supposed to learn for that particular topic. The learning outcome of the topic should be informed to the student in the first slide itself, right? So it's not what we want to teach, but more importantly, is what the students should learn. So it is no more staff or lecturer-centric or teacher-centric education. It is more on a student-centric education. So in our mind, students should come first, and we need to know what are the things they need to know after that particular session is over. So in a nutshell, OBE, basic foundation, lies on the idea that all the students can learn and succeed, but not all at the same time or same way. Because we need to know that, most of the time, not all the students are smart students. Not all of them are high achievers. There are students who are, slow learners. And with this learning outcome, it will actually help everyone to achieve the intended outcome of that particular course or particular program where they are enrolled into. So learning outcome or the OBE, outcome-based education, in a way will ensure that all the students will actually meet a minimum level of competency at the end of the program. The second thing is that successful learning promotes even more successful learning, meaning to say that we already put their learning outcome when we go to the classroom. We allow the student to learn on their own. Of course, we will actually facilitate their learning. But at the end of the day, when you implement this type of learning, and the student will get motivated, and they also will start to put in a lot of effort. In OBE, student learning time is very important. For every lecture hours that we are giving, that means there must be equivalent hours of the students where they are paying or doing revision and all that. So later on, I will share with you all how we are actually practicing in terms of lecture hours. For 1 hour of lecture, how many hours of student learning time, if it is a tutorial, if it is like group activities and things like that. So we are very fortunate because we have our national framework where everything has been clearly spelled, meaning to say that we will not invent a new thing, but then we'll follow the framework. So I believe that now in India they already have the framework. I hope that all these details are there. Otherwise, what will happen is that for every individual universities, every individual academic, higher academic learning, they will have their own agenda. At the end of the day, everything will be mixed up and we will not have a final outcome. So in Malaysia, the Malaysian Higher Education Ministry, they set out that all the institution, you like it or not, these are the things that you all have to do. This is how you calculate the student learning time. This is how the learning outcome should be written and things like that. And the third thing is that schools and teachers control the condition that determine whether or not the students are successful at school learning. in a way that, we are keeping the learning outcome as a first agenda before we enter to the classroom. So we know that the student at the end of the day, he may get a B grade, he may get a C grade or D grade for even that matter. But we have a continuous quality improvement to ensure that all the students will actually meet or achieve the minimum what they call competencies or minimum outcome where we wanted them to have. So these are the three things that we are looking at when we talk about the OBE curriculum. So in a nutshell, OBE should answer the following key question. Number one, what do you want the students to learn? So when you frame the curriculum, you need to know what are the students supposed to learn. Suppose like, in a medical or MBBS program, we have, let's say, anatomy subject for that matter. So when you frame the anatomy curriculum, then you need to know what are the things the students need to learn or the student need to achieve before he graduates successfully from the MBBS program. So that has to be clearly put in our mind, where the committee who works on developing the curriculum will have that what they call a main thing before they draft the curriculum. Of course, the subject matter expert will give the content and all that, but eventually when it goes to the next level, the curriculum committee will have to look into these details. The second, why do you want them to learn it? Of course, don't learn it. At the end of the day, when the students goes out and practice, they will lack of these particular skills. So we want to ensure when we draft the curriculum, we want to ensure that the students get that whatever thing that they are supposed to learn, so that we produce a holistic student with the required skills, and that will be helpful for them to go into the career. The third thing is that how can you best help the student learning? It is not that we go to the classroom, we teach, and then we conduct a tutorial session, and during the tutorial session, the student will ask question, and then done deal. No, because if you follow critically the OBE system, at the end of the day, you can actually monitor the individual student progress, whether the student achieve the intended learning outcome or not. You also can monitor the cohort's achievement, whether the cohort for that particular course, for that particular learning outcome, whether they have actually achieved the learning outcome or not. So all these, you can actually do that with a little bit of calculation, which I will share with you all later. The last one is that how will you know what they have learned? Basically, this will, goes into more of assessment. Through the assessment, we will know that the student, whether they achieve the intended learning outcome or not. Now, how do we do that? Normally, we do give a grading for a particular course, but there would be a difference between those students obtain 50 marks, those students obtain 90 marks. How do you differentiate them? Whether the 90% marks obtained by a student, is he actually fulfill all the requirement, or is he already grabbed that the skills? What about the 50%? Those students, obtain the 50% mark. Do they really achieve the skills? Because our cutoff point in terms of grading in Malaysia is actually 50%. 50% is actually a passing mark. As long as the student obtain the 50% marks, we consider the student passed the course. Whether the student really achieved the intended learning outcome, whether the student really achieved the skills, that is where we have to look at it. And the onus lies on the faculty or the university to come out with a policy. And we have in our university policy for teaching and learning, and we really follow that. And of course, our national framework also will be supporting in terms of the students' achievement. So Robert E. Garber, in 1996, he actually come out with OBE philosophy. So if you think that, OBE is something new, no, it is not. It has been there for some time now. And in 1996, Mr. Robert mentioned that, the OBE philosophy defined by learning outcomes. So when we mention defined by learning outcomes, that means we need to know how to write a proper learning outcome. Now, learning outcome, there are different types of learning outcome that we will look into later. I give you some example. We have a program learning outcome, and then we have a program educational outcome, and then we have a course learning outcome, and then we have a module learning outcome, and then we have a topic learning outcome. There are so many outcomes are there. And then how are we going to put everything in order so that we will meet our vision and mission? So I will talk a little bit on that as well. And then the philosophy also focus on learning outcomes, meaning to say that when you implement OBE, it's all outcome based. It's all learning outcome. How do we define the learning outcome? Later we will see what kind of verbs that we are using. Now this is where this Bloom taxonomy will come into play. Now, all these institutions that I went for accreditation visit, more or less all the staff are well versed in the OBE curriculum as well as the Bloom taxonomy. Because Bloom taxonomy, the verbs are very, very important in determining the learning outcome. So if you do use a wrong verb, at the end of the day, you may not be able to achieve the learning outcome, because your verbs will determine what kind of assessment that you want to employ to ensure that the outcome is achieved. So the Bloom taxonomy, I think everyone of you have to, get used to it. All right. Of course, we look into the learning domains of cognitive domains, and then psychomotor, and then affective domain, and so on and so on. All right. Now, if you have any question in between, you can always stop me, and then you can post the question in the chat box. I'll be more than happy to answer. And then the last one is that directed by learning outcome. That means to say that I already mentioned earlier, you set the learning outcome first, then only you start the class. That means it is like learning outcome oriented, what they call teaching. It is no more you go and teach whatever you wanted to teach, whatever you know, you go and teach and put on the student and let the student learn on their own. It is not going to be the case anymore, because we are looking into outcome and we're also looking into the competency base. At the end of the day, the student, before they graduate out, they need to meet at least a minimum requirement of this program learning outcome before they go into the job market. All right. Now, for MBBS program, there's a very stringent rule in our country, and a clear-cut learning outcome for the program has been given by the ministry. So we will, adapt that. But of course, the university have a kind of prerogative to change here and there, but not the full framework per se. All right. The curriculum development in OBE is very, very critical. So you cannot ask the subject matter expert to develop the curriculum by their own means. No, we don't do that. So what we do in outcome-based education is that you need to sit and then write down the learning outcome, what you want the students to learn, and that need to be written first, then only you frame the syllabus. So that's how it works. And of course, along the way, once you already have the learning outcome being spelled out for a particular course, and then you write down the learning outcome for the program. And now the thing is that how are we going to assess that outcomes, whether the student achieved that intended outcome or not? Now, this is where the assessment will come into role. We have to make sure that the assessment is actually aligned to the teaching and learning. For example, you have, let's say, lecture. We have a lecture, let's say about 14 hours lecture for a particular topic. At the end of the day, how are you going to assess the lecture? Normally, we will have a written examination as the assessment to assess the understanding and knowledge of the student. Now, sometimes we want the students to, grab the communication skill, for example, and how do you going to, assess the communication skill? Are you going to, still, put in a final examination, and then based on the final examination, are we going to, assess the student in terms of communication skill? Is this a final examination is the right assessment to assess the communication skills? And then these are the things that we have to look at it. Then later on, I will tell you all about how we are supposed to constructively align our teaching and learning to the assessment, or vice versa, how we, align our assessment towards to our learning outcomes. And of course, we talk about the fundamental of OBE and then philosophy of OBE. Now, the principle of OBE is more or less similar with the philosophy, but we are looking into the principles laid down by Mr. Towers in 1996 about 4 key points. All right. So when you draft out the curriculum for OBE for any program, be it MBBS program, be it health, what do you call a profession program, physiotherapy, nursing, pharmacy, dentistry, so you need to have to follow this principle. The first thing is that what the student is to learn must be clearly identified. So as I mentioned, we need to focus on what the student wants to learn at the end of the day. Who decide that? It depends on whether we have a national framework or standard for that particular program. So let me share with you all, in Malaysia, for every program, MBBS, dentistry, pharmacy, we have the Malaysian Qualification Agency who will look into the overall aspect of the the programs. But at the same time, we have our authority like Malaysian Medical Council who will look into the recognition of MBBS program. I think similar in India, we have MDC, Malaysian Dental Council, look into the recognition of dental program. So the Malaysian Medical Council, they actually have this what we call as a program standard. In the program standard, all the program learning outcome will be clearly specified. So we have to follow that. And we will also look into the details on what level the student need to learn a particular subject or particular course for that matter. So that will be given in that what they call document. So the tertiary institutions, we will adapt that guideline, and then we will work on the programs, of course, the courses. So you have to write down, let's say, for example, if it is a semester-based program, you have this, let's say, physiology. Now for physiology, let's say you have 2 courses, maybe like basic physiology. In basic physiology, you have to write down the learning outcome. That means what you want the student to learn when they enter or when they take the basic physiology course. So that has to be clearly identified first. So this is what Mr. Towers said. The second thing is that the student progress is based on demonstrated achievement. Along the way, when you implement the OBE curriculum, it is not only examination matters. The continuous assessment plays an important role that, along the way, we want to ensure all the students are able to achieve the intended learning outcome. It's simply because the continuous assessment, by doing the OBE calculation, by looking into the progress of their studies during that program or courses, it will give an indication that the student have not achieved, say, for example, for continuous assessment, 50% continuous assessment. So when the student finish with the continuous assessment, we will have some calculation to show that the student, maybe some students have not achieved that intended outcome. So if the faculty notice that for that particular cohort, the students have not achieved that intended learning outcome, all right, then the faculty can intervene and make sure that they come out with the alternative what they call a method or alternative program. We call that as an intervention program. We intervene and then we modify the what they call the delivery, so that at the end we ensure that the student is progressing well before they go into the final examination. We cannot not doing anything while the semester is progressing. Only at the end we go and then look at it. It will be too late for the students to do any kind of what they call a revision or anything for them to improve their final marks. The third thing is that multiple instructional and assessment strategies need to be available to meet the needs of each student. I think that all of us know about it. We don't really fix like our final examination. Then for all the courses, there must be a final examination. All right. For all the courses, there must be a mid-semester examination or midterm examination. For all the courses, there must be a report to be submitted. No, it is not like that. It depends on the nature of the course. The assessment and the teaching and learning strategy may vary. There are some courses where there's no final examination. All right. In the Faculty of Pharmacy where I am teaching, there are 3 or 4 courses we don't give final examination. We just go and do away with a continuous assessment. Of course, there's a lot of debate came because why, how do you really know that the student already, achieved the intended outcome? Because when we map the particular courses with our program learning outcome, it is not more on a knowledge or understanding or the cognitive skills. It's more on a skill base. For example, practical oriented. is more on a soft skills. So we don't really assess them through the final examination. So we use a multiple assessment strategies, but at the end of the day, we will make sure the student achieve the particular skills because we have this tool to ensure that they achieve the what they call the skills. The last one is that adequate time and assistance need to be provided so that each student can reach the maximum potential. So the SLT stands for student learning time. So it is not only lecturers or the teachers are teaching, but at the same time we also need to consider how much hours or how many hours the student will actually spend for that particular subject that has been taught. Example, today the student attend the, let's say, about the biochemistry course. All right, 2 hours has been given for the biochemistry, and then they talk about, let's say, about carbohydrate metabolism, for example. Then how many hours the student need to go back and then to do revision on that particular carbohydrate metabolism. So you have to consider that student learning time. Later on, when you frame the syllabus, this student learning time should be also included to get the final student learning time, because the student learning time will determine the credit hours. All right. In Malaysia, we have two types of a system. One is semester-based and the other one is term-based. I think just now I heard that Prof also mentioned that you're looking into credit hour system. So for credit hour based programs, we will have this examination at the end of the semester, but we will make sure that the credit hours given for that particular semester is actually meet the minimum requirement set by the ministry. All right, for per semester in our country, 20 to 22 credit hours is maximum where the student can take. So for 20 to 22 hours, so per credit hour is about 40 hours of a student learning time. So if it's 20, then it comes about 800 hours of learning time for that particular semester. Now, this is actually in line with our national curriculum framework, that about 800 to 900 hours are actually given for a semester for a student to learn. All right, of course, I don't want to go through this traditional education OBE. I think all of us know in traditional education, students will be sitting there and the lecturers will start from 8:01 until 8:59 in the morning. It's all one-way direction. All right, it's all one-way direction. We will go to the classroom. Whatever we wanted to, tell them, we would just tell everything that we know and then we go out. So now that is actually the traditional education content-based learning system. But now outcome-based is not like that. You go into the classroom. Now we have to put that lecture notes to the student probably about 2 or 3 days earlier so that they can do some reading and all that. And the students will be assisted in their learning. This is where the concept of flip classroom and all that will coming in. So nowadays we are moving into the direction, we will give the lecture notes 3 days or 4 days before the lecture hours. The student will learn and then they come to the classroom. We will take minimum about 20 minutes to explain the concept and theory, and after which we will actually assist the student if they have any questions and answers, if they don't understand things like that. So we are doing that. Of course, in the traditional education, it's more an assessment process. At the end of the day, assessment. But in OBE, it's more on a continuous assessment. And this is where the assessment strategies is very, very critical. And of course, the other things are there. Maybe later I can share with you all the lecture. I mean, this PowerPoint, maybe you all can go through. All right. So OBE and assessment, you cannot run away when you introduce OBE curriculum without a proper assessment. I'm stressing this because later on we will see that the assessment will determine whether qualification achieved or not. If you use the wrong assessment, at the assumption the student have not achieved that the skills. So the proper assessment is very, very critical. Now, am I audible? My internet is not stable. Am I audible?
You are audible, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right. So since in OBE, knowing whether learning outcome have been achieved is paramount, it is expected that OBE emphasizes assessment of outcomes and is assessment driven. Of course, like, all of us being teachers for many years now, and we have been taught in a different school when we, went into the university and all that. And of course, time has changed now. Things has been changed. What we see today will not be relevant tomorrow. Whatever we teach today may not be relevant tomorrow as well. So things are moving rapidly. So outcome-based education will allow us to make sure the syllabus is current and is actually market-driven. So that's why before we frame the syllabus, we have to make sure that we get the feedback from the stakeholders and all that, which I will touch a little bit later. So we get that feedback from the stakeholders, what is actually happening in the market, in the medical field for that matter, pharmacy and all that. So now we need to know from those who are practicing outside, because sometimes what happens is that when we frame the syllabus, let's say it's a 5-year syllabus we frame, when you frame it in year 1, when the student moving to the final year, whatever you frame it in the first year may not be relevant in the 5th year. So then we have to change. And that's where the CQI plays an important role. I will touch a little bit about the continuous quality improvement, where the OBE also emphasized on the continuous quality improvement. All right. Of course, there's a lot of benefit of OBE. It's more directed, and will have a coherent curriculum, which will be internationally recognized, because at the end of the day, we're not looking into grades alone, but we're also looking into what kind of skills, what kind of competencies, what kind of outcome the student have achieved and things like that. We are also in the verge of looking into our scroll and also transcript, because most of the time our transcript only spelled out the grades, and there's no what do you call the details of what kind of skill the student have obtained over the years. Of course, the program learning outcome will clearly spell it out, but we're also looking into how we can improvise our transcript, which will mention that the student, in terms of communication skills, what is the percentage, in terms of the leadership skills, what is the percentage, and all that. So, of course, the OBE curriculum, when you draft it carefully, when you assess that students carefully, with that help, I think we can actually give an indication to the, employers that, the student graduated from this particular university has achieved all these skills. So in Malaysia, we don't have that. Probably in India, I'm not very sure. They might having it or other part of the world, but we are working on it. Of course, there's a school leaving certificate is there, been spelled out, all those things. Sometimes, extra things would be spelled out there, but actual case, the student may not be as good as what has been written in the university leaving certificate. All right. Now, graduates will be more relevant to industry. And this is what I'm saying now, because the curriculum is drafted and there's a continuous quality improvement process will go on. And because of we are looking at the outcome based, then the graduate that we are graduating out will be relevant to industry. It could be any field for that matter, all right? Not necessarily medical field, but of course, the other field like business, engineering, all that. And because of the industry-ready curriculum, and the students are industry-ready, the moment they go out, and they will be easily get a job, and that will help us to, improve our graduate on time, and also, improve our job placement and all that. So whenever you look at the rating and ranking, this also be an important aspect, whether the graduates are being, secured a job within 6 months of graduation and all that. So outcome-based education more or less will help us to achieve that. And so far, touch wood, in our university, of course, we are a medical university. We also do have other technical courses like engineering. We also have a biotechnology, and all the students are somehow being employed within the next 3 months or 6 months after the graduation. The last part is that there will be a continuous quality improvement in place. Whether you like it or not, you have to do it, because I will let you know that every semester over, there will be a CQI process need to be implemented, so that whatever mistake that we done for that particular cohort is not repeated for the next cohort. For example, we have, let's say, batch 1. In batch 1, in term 1 or semester 1, we have actually employed probably about 5 or 6 courses. So along the way, you teach, and then you assess, and finally we grade the student, and then we come out with a PLO attainment analysis, program learning outcome attainment analysis. And then we found that, the particular cohort, the batch 1, they do not, meet that requirement about, let's say, about 70% for that particular learning outcome. So if you know that, that means something is wrong somewhere in our, not in a curriculum maybe, but then the way we do the teaching, maybe the teaching and learning strategies is not correct, or maybe the assessment method that we are doing may not be correct. So these are the things where we want to look at it before we allow the second batch to go through the first year. So we have to do these changes so that the next batch, you improve whatever lacking that you have for the first cohort, so that the second cohort will not undergo the same thing. So this is where the continuous quality improvement is very important. And whenever we go out for the accreditation visit, we will look at it, because in our framework, it is mentioned that the continuous quality improvement must be in place, and the faculty need to take honors on implementing it correctly. Because at the end of the day, the student graduating from the university will represent the university, so in terms of the quality. So we have to make sure that the student is actually having the current knowledge. Now, how the OBE flow? Now, we have a OBE education. We already come out with the framework mentioned that OBE, right? So if you don't have the framework, but the university can come out with a policy saying that, this is actually the framework that we're looking at. All the faculties, MBBS program, allied profession program, everybody must come with the OBE education. Then you develop the OBE curriculum. Then the OBE curriculum, you want what the student achieve based on the learning outcomes. So once you already have that, then you draft out what are the strategies that you want to implement so that the student achieve the outcome. All right. So we want to make sure that whatever outcome that we have laid out, the student need to attain it, but by having a proper teaching and learning strategies. So that is why when we prepare the cost pro forma is actually the teaching plan. In the teaching plan, or sometimes, we also call that as the teaching schedule, right? So if you have the teaching schedule, in the teaching schedule, we have to clearly spell out what is the teaching and learning strategy. Suppose you want to have let's say you have a tutorial, you have lectures, and then maybe you want to have PBLs, and then maybe you want to have a group work or something like that, or maybe like video teaching. So all of that have to be specified, because through these teaching and learning strategies, we want the student to achieve the outcome. So this is where the OBLT comes in. The OBLT comes in, outcome-based learning and what they call teaching strategies. And then once we already implement that, then we look into the assessment, outcome-based assessment. As I mentioned, you have multiple strategies for assessment. You cannot stick into final examination alone. In the mid-semester, you just have only mid-semester exam, term examination. You can't have that. Of course, we will ask the student to write the assignment, project, and all that. But again, whether the assignment and project is actually mapped with what type of learning outcome, that also you have to clearly specify. Right? Of course, along the way, I will try to touch a little bit on how you will actually able to map it with the course learning to the program learning outcome. From the program learning outcome, of course, the program educational objective, which will be determined towards to the achieving the university's vision and mission. So in a nutshell, the OB flow is very simple. You have the framework, you follow the framework. If the framework, you have a program standard, we follow the program standard by the authorities, MDCs, MMCs, or so on and so forth. And then you develop the OB curriculum, but you must have the outcome in your mind first before you draft the OB curriculum. Once you draft out the OB curriculum, then you draft out the best teaching and learning strategies. Once you already have that, then you go to the assessment, multiple style of assessment to ensure that, the student, be assessed in the right way, so that at the end of the day, the student achieve the outcome or intended skills. And finally, if or lacuna, then we go for quality improvement process, right? So the quality improvement process is a must in OBE. So you cannot take it out. That's why in our university, I'm holding that post because I'm also part of the Center for Learning Excellence for Teaching and Learning. So we are actually looking at this holistically. So if they do mistake in any of the curriculum, then the curriculum committee, which I'm, the deputy chairman, we will look at it and then we correct it. So it's a lot of work, because the faculty have to prepare the curriculum, OB curriculum, they have to sit and then work on it. Eventually, you have to bring it to the next level. Multiple layer is there to check before we submit the document for approval. So therefore, most of the time, we will have a minimum feedback from the ministry for us to implement the new syllabus. Okay, there's a question here. I think I will take the question, otherwise it will be difficult later. Now, should we give preference to creating graduate or acceptable international standard, or worry more about the graduate required for national need? Will it not lead to brain drain from developing countries to developed countries? Yes, I mean, see, first of all, we are working towards looking into fulfilling the national requirement, right? So the national requirement is the must for us to fulfill, because otherwise we will not get the accreditation. But when we frame the syllabus, or the content, we can always look into global perspective or global aspect, which means to say that although you're preparing a curriculum to suit your national requirement, but at the same time, the curriculum is also meant to reach out the global perspective. So we are not going to take each and every individual country's requirement or things like that. But generally, when you talk about a specified program or professional program, more or less, you look at country to country, the requirement more or less will be the same. So when you prepare for local need, but you also will address the international need. That's a good thing, is that when you have an international flavor in the faculty, I think that will be very much helpful. Like in our institution, for medical faculty, almost like about 50 to 60%, or I would rather say about 65% of our faculties are actually international. All right. There are lecturers from, many of them from India. There are some from the, we also have from Thailand, Indonesia, and some of them from the other countries. So there's a multinational flavor is there. So when you frame the curriculum with them, they also can give their feedback, and we try to frame so that in a way we don't load the student because to fulfill the international requirement, but we come out with a holistic curriculum to fulfill both local and international. I believe that I've answered your question, Dr. Yogesh. All right, so with that, I think I'll move on to the next one. Okay, so OBE process. Now let us look into the OBE process. Now OBE process is something similar with what this Edward Deming, I think it's somewhere in 1950s, came out with the action, plan, do, and check. So we will look and we will go through this cycle over and over when you implement the outcome-based education. All right, so it can be divided into four. The first one is planning and designing. That means you have to write the outcome first. Outcomes, as I mentioned earlier, there are multiple layers of outcomes, which I will explain in a little while. And then, of course, developing the curriculum is the most important one. The curriculum that we develop, it has to be current. Now, in medical field, a lot of new technology has come in already, and we cannot be like, teaching the old thing that we learned maybe 20 years or 30 years ago. Right? Nowadays, everything is like, been, rapidly changing. So we have to ensure that our students are being equipped with these skills before they graduate out. Last 3-4 years back in our country, we never captured the digital and the numerical skill. Of course, numerical skill is part of it. The digital skill was not there, as we never give an emphasis for the digital skill. Of late, about last 5 years now, we also put in a digital skill as part of the skill that the student need to have before they graduate out, because we feel that most of the information obtained by the student is through actually digital, all right, through the internet and all that. So we are trying to reducing the knowledge base, or maybe like, recalling type of teaching or assessment. We move into more application based. So if you look at the, cognitive theory or domain, we are actually reducing number of C1 to C2s, and we are more focusing on a C3 to C6 now. Because when you ask about definition question, the students already know it, because they don't have to memorize that, because already available in the internet and all that. So we don't want them to go into memorizing and then vomit out in the examination. More on application. Of course, implementing is the most critical one, because you need to have all those relevant resources to be available when you're implementing it. Because OBE, we are not looking into only lectures. We're also looking into other ways of teaching and learning. This is where the flipped classroom concept comes in. You need to have a proper IT in place and ensure that everything, in order for the students to learn. And we also have to make sure that when you go out of the context of the older way of teaching, now we have to give a proper resources for the student. Talking about internet facilities, it will become a must. Now the speed is actually important. Those days, we give 1 gig. The student are complaining 1 gig speed is not good, sir. So now we have to come out with a 2 gig now. So we are working on getting that better speed, better intra facilities, internet facility for the student. Of course, that is actually implementing in delivery. Of course, assessment is important, as I mentioned. And finally, the CQI will coming in when we evaluate the entire based on examination, different types of assessment. All right. So in a nutshell, this is the one, the same thing. Now, how are we going to frame the learning outcome? This is where the important thing that we are looking at. The first thing is that before we frame the outcome-based education, all right, we have to call in the stakeholders. Now, the stakeholders for different program will be different entities. All right. If it is the medical program, of course, the medical council will be our key stakeholder, and of course, the Ministry of Health also key stakeholder. So when we frame our curriculum, OB curriculum, we have actually invited people from these ministries, people from the Malaysian Medical Council, and then we also have an academy for medicine. We invite all of them, of course, Malaysian Qualification Agency, alumni, and then the other relevant stakeholders. We also invited our external examiners, external advisors. Everyone has to be there because they will actually give us a glimpse of what is actually happened in the real world. So they come in, we get the input from them, we formulate. The first one we formulate will be our PEO. Now, what is PEO? What is our PEO? PEO is nothing but our program educational objective. So if you allow me, I will skip this and then go to the next slide, and then maybe I will revert back. Now, the first thing that we would like to frame for our program would be program educational objective. Now, how do we frame the program educational objective? This is where we get the input from what I mentioned just now. So the program educational objective will clearly mention what are the attributes, what are the skills the student will have after they graduate from the program, probably 4 to 5 years after the graduation. We don't measure the program educational objective immediately, all right? So we frame that program educational objective based on the input from the key stakeholders, and then we write down, all right? And after which we implement, and then the student go through the 5 years of program, and then they go to work. And after 5 years, they work, then we go back to their employers, and then we get the feedback and see whether the students are performing as what we have actually intended earlier. And then once you already have the program educational objectives, then we write down our program learning outcomes. Now, what is program learning outcome? All right. Now, program learning outcome is the statement on what skills the student will have upon graduation. So meaning to say that we into the entire outcome, and then we want the students to have it during their graduation. That means after 5 years of the program, we will know that the student have achieved these skills. How do they achieve the skills? Because we have actually framed the syllabus in such a way immediately after they graduate, they have the skills. Whether the skills have been implemented correctly, whether the students have actually fulfilled the desire of the university or the faculty, that will be determined through the program educational objective. All right. So that learning outcome is very, very important. Now, the faculty, we have to sit down and then come for medical program, you have to adapt it. But of course, the curriculum content can be vary according to university. All right. Then we come back to the another learning outcome, which is course learning outcome. Now, the course learning outcome is actually drafted in such a way that after the completion of the particular course, the student will be able to achieve that particular skills or intended outcome. So when we write down the learning outcomes, the course learning outcome, we need to have in our mind whether this course learning outcome can be mapped or a program learning outcome or not. Right? So these are the important aspect we have to look at it. And of course, when we frame the course learning outcome, we have to use these Bloom taxonomy verbs, because all the learning outcomes, whether module learning outcome, course learning outcome, or program learning outcome, is all verb driven. So we have to use a correct verb. If you if you use a wrong verb, at the end of the day, the student will not be, or the cohort will not be able to achieve the course learning outcome or program learning matter. All right. So I will touch a little bit on that in detail later. So allow me to go here. All right. So Edward Deming cycle of a PDCA, plan, develop, and then check and then act. We look into the formulation of program educational objective, and then after that program learning outcome. So once you already determine the program learning outcome, then you determine the course learning outcome. Once you already determine the course learning outcome, then you determine the topic learning outcome. So the subject matter expert who actually prepare the curriculum, they will have to write down the topic learning outcome or module learning outcome. And the module and topic learning outcome should be aligned with the program learning outcome, right? And then, of course, you have to assess the course learning outcome through assessment, different type of assessment. Once you already got the results, that PLO attainment tool will come into picture. And then later on, you see whether is there anything to be improvised or not. So that's where the CQI will come in, all right? So again, this is actually of what I've mentioned just now. If you look at it in the planning stage, develop the curriculum. We develop the curriculum, first of all. Before we develop the curriculum, we need to know what is actually our program educational objective. And once you already drafted it, then go for program learning outcome. So all this must be in place before you implement the syllabus. Without this, you can never evaluate, or you can never understand whether the student achieved the learning outcome or not. All right. Then you develop the curriculum. When you develop the curriculum, course learning outcome is important. Accordingly, you develop the right teaching and learning activities. And then, of course, assessment must be correct. So you can have a multiple assessment. You can have a multiple teaching and learning activities, but all that should be aligned to our course learning outcome. No point having assessment, simply assessing something, but it is not aligned with the course learning outcome. That is also a problem, right? Of course, based on this course learning outcome, the topics, hours has been taken, hours been used for teaching and learning, hours been used for assessment and all that. The total student learning time will be determined, and then the credit hours will be determined according to the total student learning time. So when you implement, the curriculum will be implemented. Of course, you have to have all the documents, in place, because at the end of the day, when the accreditation council, when they come in for the accreditation visit, they will check whether the documents are there for that matter. So documentations are very important. And of course, when you implement, you want to do assessment, the test blueprint must be prepared before you implement that particular curriculum or particular course and all that. I'm sure that all of you, we already know all this. And the last part is the important one, as I mentioned, CQI. All right. Okay. So when I mention alignment, I'm talking about the constructive alignment. The learning outcome will determine the final output, right? So accordingly, we have a vision mission. The university vision mission will tell us, in what way we want to, run a program. We already have existing programs like MBBS and other healthcare programs. So your program educational objective should be aligned with the university vision and mission. Obviously, all the program will have alignment, but if it is not aligned, because now we're talking about outcome-based education, this is the right time for us to go back, revisit whether our program educational objective is aligned with our vision and mission of the university. Now, who will be framing the program educational objective? The faculty. There will be a committee who will look into it, and then they will draft it, and then it will be discussed in the faculty, level, and that will be presented in the next level, probably academic quality assurance department or something like that. And then once you already drafted a program educational objective, I called it as PEO. And then we move on to developing the program learning outcome. I'm repeating here so that we can understand better. Course learning outcome, topic module learning outcome. Everything goes the other way around. At the end of the day, the topic module learning outcome should be aligned with course learning outcome. Course learning outcome should be aligned with program learning outcome. Program learning outcome should be aligned with program educational objective. Now, how are we going to determine whether the student achieved the outcome? Topic module learning outcome, you can always use formative, and although it is not contributing to the grading, the formative assessment will give us an indication whether the student have actually achieved the learning outcome or not in a way. But of course, the summative assessment will come into play. We will have what they call the final analysis to see whether the cohort or the particular individual student have actually achieved the intended outcome. All right. So the course learning outcome, of course, grading will come into picture, and we will look into it later. Program learning outcome, the mapping of course learning outcome, program learning outcome will tell us whether that particular student, for that matter, of the cohort achieved that program learning outcome or not. All right. I think I already mentioned a little bit about program educational objective. That has to be for 4 to 5 years after the student graduate. And I've already mentioned a few program educational objectives for our MBBS program. It's okay to share because more or less, I think most of the medical program, they will have this, right? So our program educational objective is to produce a competent healthcare provider who delivers evidence-based services, applying knowledge and skills to treat medicine of the individual and the community. So this is our first program educational objective. Now, where do we get this from? We get this some points from our national framework or our Malaysian Medical Council's guidelines. So we will take all that, put it into a nice sentence, and this is our program educational objective. How do we know whether the student achieved this? After 5 years of the graduation, we will evaluate this through exit survey, the survey through the stakeholders. Likewise, there are multiple program educational objectives. There's always a question whether do we need to have many program educational objectives. You can have as many as you want, but if you have as many as we want, at the end of the day, our program learning outcome also will have to be many. So when you have more of a program learning outcome, then it will be pretty difficult, and you have to add in more learning time for the student to achieve the learning outcome or the program learning outcome. So at the end of the day, what will happen? It will become a burden for the student because they have to do so many things while they are learning. At the same time, they have to attend lectures, they have to go to, group, lectures, they go to practical, sometimes they go for community service, they have to attach to the, and things like that. So if you come out with more number of educational objectives, then it will be a little difficult for you to map it with the program learning outcome. But it's okay. It boils down to the university policy. In our university, we normally keep 4. This is what the framework also mentions. So we go for 4 PEO. So it boils down to the university's policies, right? So you can't have a 1 or 2. I mean, 1 or 2 is very, not to say very comprehensive, but we can have 4. And then program learning outcome. Now, the good thing about our country per se is that the national framework mentioned that about 5 clusters. The 5 clusters will talk about, the first thing is that the knowledge and understanding, which implies the lower order thinking skills. And then we have a cognitive domain, which focus more on problem solving or HOTS, higher order thinking skills. And then we have a functional skills. That functional skills will have these interpersonal skills, practical skills, digital skills, numerical skills, and then personal skills. All that will come into the functional skills. And then we have another domain under the ethics and professionalism. So that will also, we have to look at it because being a medical program, you need to follow that. So that will be another domain that we have. And then the last domain that we have is actually the entrepreneurial and managerial aspect of it. All right. So when we look at it, 5 domains by the ministry broken into 11 program learning outcomes. So all the universities, when they submit the learning outcome, it has to be 11. All right. So it has to be pretty specified, and all the universities, all the faculty have to have that. Only difference is that, we know that, digital skill is the skill that the student have to obtain before they graduate out. That means our program learning outcome will mention digital skill as part of the learning outcome. Like, for example, the first one, if you look at the example here, at the end of this program, let's say medical program, student will be able to perform clinical examination, basic clinical and laboratory procedures to diagnose and manage complex clinical problems. So here we are looking at the practical skills of the student, right? So we are having a practical skills for our program learning outcome. So we fulfill the national framework requirement. Now, when you look at the second learning outcome, a program learning outcome, apply critical, analytical, and evaluation skills to resolve complex clinical problems and arrive at innovative solution to complex healthcare problems. So this is more on a HOTS, problem solving skills. So we have one learning outcome, fulfill the cognitive domain of the critical thinking and problem solving. So we have that. So likewise, we have about 11 program learning outcome for all the programs in the country. So again, it boils down to the policy. If your policy mentioned that, these are the learning outcome for that particular program, then we can work on that accordingly. I think I already touched a little bit on the course learning outcome. Topic module learning also already touched a little bit. And of course, the Bloom taxonomy, right? The verbs for the cognitive domain, psychomotor domain, and affective domain is very, very important. All right. Now, do we have to remember every aspect of it? No, but the university can come out with Excel template. We already come out with the Excel template showing that, if it is a cognitive domain, let's say, for example, if it is a C1 knowledge, what are the verbs can be parked under the knowledge? All right. Each time we don't have to go back to the, internet, look for the correct verb for, knowledge. So we have a set of verbs which can be related to the knowledge. And likewise for C2, we have a different set of verbs, and likewise for C6. Of course, when you frame the curriculum, you have to be very careful because the course learning outcome will be mapped with the program learning outcome. All right. If it is a first year course, you cannot have I wouldn't say cannot have, we don't want to go for C4 or maybe C5 and C6 in year one. All right. Maybe year one is more on a basic sciences, right? So maybe we may have more on the C1, C2, C3 in our course learning outcome. So because the C1, C2, C3 will be, the verbs will be used to frame the course learning outcome. Now, if you have any different in opinion, or maybe you feel that, you are doing in different way, you can also share with me. Maybe we can take it up, in time goes.
These are the same that we also follow, sir.
Okay, all right, then fine. So maybe this will be a kind of a revision. Anyway, so the psychomotor domain and all that, I think we all need to, some or other need to, when we talk about the cognitive domain, later on you need to know what kind of assessment is suitable for cognitive domain. Psychomotor domain mean what kind of assessment, and then affective domain more on the soft skills, what type of assessment will be needed. All right, so I will go into because we are talking about the outcome-based education, writing the correct learning outcome is very, very important and essential. All right, so I will spend about 15 minutes, next 15 minutes, just to go through a little bit on writing up a proper course learning outcome. Because if you write a wrong, if you don't write it properly, or you don't, have a proper learning outcome, at the end of the day, you will not meet the intended learning outcome or program learning outcome. So when you write a course learning outcome, three things must be taken into consideration. The first one is the verb, right? A right verb has to be selected for that particular course, right? So as I mentioned, the verb that we are, selecting must be having this SMART concept: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time frame, and observable. You don't use verb where we cannot have you are not able to measure. For example, when we write the course learning outcome, you don't write, familiar. The student should be familiar. Of course, student can be familiar with so many things, but if it is familiar, then how are we going to, assess the student, the familiarity of the student? So it has to be something where we need to, accessible, or maybe we assess them accordingly. So proper verb is important, like I've given here. Describe the principles used in designing X. Example, evaluate the strengths and weakness of blah, 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 right? So the verbs are very important, and try to avoid these verbs. Why I'm actually taking you all through with this is that because at the end of the day, when you talk about course learning outcome, that will determine what is the mapping with the program learning outcome, which I will show in a while. All right. The second thing that we need to consider is that the conditions or substance, the content that we would like to add in our course learning outcome. All right. Now, just now, if you have this course learning outcome, like for example, describe the principle used in designing X, for example, that we only use the verb, but the condition to describe where the student have to, use that is actually lacking. All right. For example, if you want to add in the condition, then we put another substance into it, describe orally, means to say that it is not written, but we want the student at the end of the day describe orally. That means orally they have to describe the principle used in designing X. All right. If you just put the describe, then later on for assessment part will be difficult. Whether the student have to describe it orally or whether the student have to write it, whether the student have to send in terms of assignment. Now, how are we going to go that? So that's why we need to have the verbs and condition together in the course learning outcome. All right. And the third thing that we are looking at is actually what you call as the criteria or the standard which we have to put into the course learning outcome. I give you an example. Now, describe the principle used in designing only employs the verb. Then we add on another one more. Describe orally the principle. The orally is actually the content that we mentioned just now. And finally, we want to see where it will be applicable. All right. That's where the standard or competency level will come in. So now we reframe the entire learning outcome, the course learning outcome, into the student after completing the course should be able to describe orally the 5 principles used in designing X. That means it is not only principle we are talking at it. We want the student to know all the 5 principles. It is not just principle per se, because we want the student, because that is the learning outcome that we are looking at it. The student need to know what is the principle used in designing, but we want them to know all 5. All right. So sometimes, in framing the question, we will give a very, what do you call, a blunt question or very general question. We ask the student to write down the principle used in certain term, blah, blah, blah. And the student write it. And if you don't have a proper marking scheme, if a student write the 3 pages, we give maximum marks. If the student write only 1 pages, although the content is there, we give 1 mark. I mean, I'm not saying we are doing that, but sometimes, we are, the tendency is there, right? And if you want to become more relevant, then we put design a concrete beam using Microsoft Excel worksheet based on MSN 1992. You'll become more specific now. At the end of the day, when you write another what they call CLO, course learning outcome, you're becoming more specific now, right? Of course, now we have this. Maybe we all can try it out. We have this learning outcome. Calculate from the first principle the beam deflection at the center to within 1 decimal point. So I'm not taking the example of the medical education, but I'm just giving some example which I have shared with other faculty members earlier. So I'm just taking it. Maybe we can try to understand this and then we move on to the more specific on the medical education. All right. So now we have the course learning outcome. Can we identify which one is our verb, which one is our condition, which one is our standard? All right. I think all of us know. I'd like straight away go for that. The verb is actually calculate. The condition here is actually the first principle, the beam of deflection, and then the third one will be the center. That means the beam of deflection at the center will be the condition that we are looking at it, and the standard is that to 1 decimal point. So that means when you write a course learning outcome, because that will determine what type of competency skill that our student will have. So you have to clearly spell it out, and it has to be reflected in our course learning outcome. Do not allow the course learning outcome to be just very generic, very not centric or specific. So this is what we do normally. All right, and then the next one is that write an effective course outcome that include lower and higher order cognitive skill for 1 semester course. We have the verb, right, is actually the verb, condition effective course outcomes, and then include lower and higher order cognitive skill. That will be the condition, and then the standard will be in 1 semester course, right? So that will be our standard. So when we write down the course learning outcome, of course, we already have a course learning outcome for all the program, but then we need to look at it, because when we don't have this condition and standard, it will become very generic. And at the end of the day, you will not be able to assess the student based on the intended outcome. So all these have to be clearly specified in our learning outcome, right? Of course, the weakness is that sometimes, we use the verb like understand, know, appreciate. Appreciate, so what? How do we going to assess the student whether the student is appreciating certain things or not. It's very subjective. So the verb that we select to frame the outcome is actually very important. All right. So vague CLO or CLO that are too broad or general, it normally will not help us to allow the student to achieve the intended outcome. Right. I mean, I'm just sharing what we normally use. All right. If you have a policy in the university or some guideline of what type of verbs that generally to be used to frame the course learning outcome, then by well and good, we can use that. All right. So I'm giving you a few examples before we move on to the actual part of the mapping. Yeah. All right. So here, the first CLO, which is mentioned in the poor here, students will demonstrate knowledge of the history, literature, and function of the theater, including works from various periods and cultures. So when this is a CLO, that shows that the student demonstrate knowledge. How do the student demonstrate knowledge? How? How are you going to determine whether the student demonstrating the knowledge or not, right? So it is like, it's very vague. So instead, maybe we can write it in a better way. The student will be able to explain. That means we put a correct verb there, explain. All right. The rest of it, you can modify according to the three conditions that I've given now. All right. The same thing, a lot of poor CLOs has been given. I'd like to go for this one. Yeah. The student will understand the importance of self-growth and reproduction. All right. So here, we want the student to understand the importance of self-growth. Yeah, fine. The student understand. So what? The student understand? After that is what? How are you going to determine whether they understand properly or not? So this is where we put action verb, correct action verb. We rewrite an entire CLO. The student will explain the importance of self-growth and reproduction. Now, again, the word explain, whether you want to look into the cognitive domain of a C2 or maybe C5, it depends on the context that that we are looking at. The context of this, the self-growth and reproduction, the importance of it, and that's why we have to determine whether it's go for C2 or C5. Because if you look into Bloom taxonomy, the explain word is interchangeably used in C2 as well as a C5, if I'm not mistaken. All right. Yeah. Same thing goes for the word describe. When you use the word describe, so if it is a first year, then you can use as a C1. But if the same verb used for the third year and fourth year like that, the verb describe should be used in terms of the C4 or C5 context. All right. So these are the learning domains, the Bloom taxonomy. I normally use that as a 3H. H stand for number one is head, the second one is hand, the third one is the heart. Head is for cognitive, hand for psychomotor, heart is actually for affective. So effective, cognitive, psychomotor, although all of it comes under the learning domains, but every one of it, when you frame the learning outcome, will have a different understanding, and of course, different assessment and teaching learning outcome. All right, so I just give you one or two quizzes so that I check whether we all understand the concept or not. All right, the first one, which outcome statement is better, A or B?
B.
Yeah, B. As simple as that, right? So because we don't want the student to understand, but we want the students to explain. So this is where the outcome-based education comes in, because at the end of the day, what is the outcome? The outcome is that we want the student to explain the connection between morality and law. It cannot be understand alone, because the student understand, but we don't know the depth of the understanding. Whether the student understand only the concept of it, whether the student understand the verb of explain. The next one, which outcome statement is better? Student will be able to demonstrate information handling. The student will be able to demonstrate information handling and research skill based on current practices. If you look at it, demonstrate is the key verb. Yeah, both the learning outcome has the verb, but the first learning outcome, if you look at it, does not have a what you call the criteria or the content of it. So we need to add on the criteria and content, right? So the content, the criteria is actually, if you look at it, the current practices, and the content will be, how they handle the information in a research scale and things like that. So I hope that you get some understanding on this. Maybe another one more, we go to this one. Yeah. Which outcome statement is better? Student will be able to know the behavioral, cognitive, and social interaction models of learning, or the student will be able to compare and contrast the behavioral, cognitive, and social interaction models of learning. So which one is the better learning outcome? Often you see that, the learning outcome more or less similar, but as I mentioned, the three different condition has to be applied, and that can give you a better learning outcome. And that will also ease our way to come out with a proper assessment, because we will always rely back our assessment on our blueprint, right? So if the blueprint mentioned that, we want the student, to explain, then it has to be explained. So that will be easier. So of course, B will be the better one, because we ask the student to compare and contrast, between the behavioral, cognitive, and social interaction. Likewise, there are so many things that we can actually do it. And when we frame the outcome-based education curriculum, I think the faculty need to sit closely and then look into this aspect. I'm not saying this is the best thing, but of course, if you already have some practice, maybe you can actually improvise based on what I've given here. All right, student will be able to design a lesson. Student will be familiarized with the lesson. So which one is a better learning outcome? So we just now I mentioned, you don't try to use the word like, familiar, know, understand, and all that. So it is better to put a correct word. So here, A will be the best answer, because the student able to design a lesson rather than familiarize with the lesson, right? You have So course learning outcome will have to have the verb, and then the condition, and then the last one will be the standard or the criteria that we look at it. So we need to have all these three situations or three different things in a course learning outcome, and that will be a better course learning outcome. All right. Then you determine based on the action verb whether this learning outcome, course learning outcome, is actually looking into the knowledge or understanding, or whether it is go on a comprehension, whether it's go on an evaluation, synthesis, analysis, and things like that, whether it's a C1, C2, or C6, right? So that has to be spelled out clearly in our course learning outcome, all right? So we have to sit and then go through that. Okay, next one I've actually given for psychomotor skills as well. So maybe this one can take it out when I share this lecture notes here. All right. Okay, so we move to the important aspect. I give maybe I take 1 minute break. If you have any question, you can actually post it before we go to the important aspect of the mapping of curriculum into the program learning outcome and program educational objective. Okay, so now we move on to the key part of the session, the curriculum mapping to learning outcomes. So often we have a curriculum, we have a learning outcome, and then how do we map the curriculum with the learning outcome? The multiple level of a learning outcome we already mentioned. We have a topic and module learning outcome, where at the end of the topic, the student need to, master it or achieve that learning outcome. And then we have a course learning outcome. Immediately after the course is over, the student need to have that particular achieve the outcome. And then we move on to the program learning outcome after the program completion, and then finally program educational objective. So how are we going to map this so that at the end of the day, we want that cohort or the particular batch is able to achieve the outcome? Then this is where it comes in. All right. First of all, as I mentioned, once you already drafted the program educational objective, we have to formulate the PLOs. Now, formation of PLOs is a collective effort. It is not that, deans and deputy deans, academic, they are the one have to work on it. And then if it is a center, if you're coming out with some kind of a module, then it's only, boils down to the director and so on. No, it is not. It is actually a collective effort. Everyone need to be, playing important part in formulating the PLOs, because at the end of the day, when you teach the student, in your mind, in our mind, we need to have what we want the student to be in 5 years down the line. So we need to have that, and that will help us to teach the student accordingly. Otherwise, we will be like, going to the class and then just deliver the content and then we'll come back. All right. So that will not be the right scenario. So outcome-based education in a way will prepare us to deliver that in that such a manner. All right. So once you already formulate the PLOs, then we formulate the CLOs for the course. All right. Now here we have to appoint a particular person or particular group of members who are expertise in that particular course and give and allow them to come out with the content. And before they specify the content, they have to draft the course learning outcome, what they want the student to learn at the end of the day. All right. That has to be drafted, and then curriculum content will be, developed after that. All right. So once you already develop the curriculum content, then we will go for teaching and learning strategies. And then, we go for the what kind of assessment that we would like to employ so that we know that the student achieved that particular intended outcome. All right. So all these we need to do, before we implement the OBE curriculum. I will share with you all what we do in our university, how this will be incorporated into a simple table. All right. Why? Because this will be a benchmark for all the other courses across the faculty, across the university to follow for synchronized purpose. Of course, some faculties, they may have, if they are not a medical faculty or health sciences based faculties, if they're technical, they may have a different way of doing it. But at the end of the day, there will be a framework for all the university staff or university faculty members to follow. So I will share with you all how we actually do based on our framework. Able to see my slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So this is how we do it. All right. This is actually the Excel template, a simplified Excel template. And this is actually cost pro forma. I'm sure that every one of us having it. But when we frame outcome-based education or syllabus, we will look into the total student learning outcome, and we also will look into the mapping of the curriculum or the courses with the program learning outcome. All right. So here we will have the course name. If you have a course code, you let course code, synopsis, who are the academic members who will involve in this, when this particular course is being offered, in which year, and then if it is a credit-based system, how many credit hours that you're looking at. The credit hour, you don't have to, write it here. The Excel template will actually give you the credit hours when you fill in the student learning time here. All right. You fill in the hours here. The learning time will be auto-calculated. When the student learning time is auto-calculated, the final or total student learning time will be calculated by the Excel template, and automatically the credit value for that particular course also will be calculated. So it's all automated. So easier, we just prepare the curriculum, and then for that course, we go and then write down the course content. Let's say you have a chapter one, and then you have the lecture hours for, let's say, 3 hours. And then what will be the independent learning time? Let's say for 1 hour of lecture for that topic, the student will need about 2 or 3 hours, for example, all right, to grasp the particular lecture. So that will be 3 hours plus 1 hour lecture. That will give you total of 4 hours of a student learning time. All right. So 4 hours of a student learning time is actually allocated for that particular course. Likewise, we will write all the content and here for that particular course, and then we put down all the details of the hours, and then accordingly the independent learning time, and that will give you the student learning time. Now, what are the things that we have in this template here will be, just give me 1 minute. All right. So what are the other thing that we will have is that we will need to write down the course learning outcome. You have a course learning outcome 1, course learning outcome 2, course learning outcome 3. Now, in our university, we made a policy that, the course learning outcome for a particular course can vary from 3 learning outcome to 5. All right. So now, can we have more than 5 course learning outcome for a course? You can have it, as long you have a proper teaching and learning. But then in our mind that more number of learning outcome, that means you need to have a more number of assessment. More number of assessment mean that, you have to conduct, one assessment for this achievement of per first learning outcome, course learning outcome, another assessment type to achieve the second course learning outcome, another assessment to go for another course learning outcome. Imagine if you have a 5 or 6. Yes, sir. Okay, all right. So if you have more than 3 course learning outcome, if the university policy or the faculty practices 5 learning outcome, that's good, but that's okay. But you must have a proper assessment strategy for that. But also we need to look into it. The students are oriented based on the student learning time. When you increase the course learning outcomes, you are increasing the number of student learning time. You're also increasing the student assessment time. So therefore, at the end of the day, the students will be loaded with so many things for a particular course. Imagine 5 learning outcomes, 5 different assessment strategies. You have about 20 courses for, I'm too optimistic. Maybe you have 5 courses in a semester. Each course has 5 different course learning outcome. Each one of it 5 different assessment strategies, 5 into 5, 25. And then you have 25 into another 5, almost like, how many assessment strategies are there. And the student have to go through all the assessment within one semester. That will be a burden for the student. So therefore, the faculty need to decide, or if there's a policy, it's better still, we can limit to that. All right. So we write down the course learning outcome using this template. Sorry, so sensitive. And then in that template, we also will map each of the course learning outcome map with the which program learning outcome of the program. In our framework, there are 5 clusters. 5 clusters will break into 11 learning outcomes. All the programs, when I mention program, we are referring to the dental, medical, pharmacy and all that. 11 learning outcome will be there. Each course, we will map it here. We will do a tick here. All right, we will do a tick here. Sorry. Okay, so suppose my first course learning outcome is more on knowledge base. That means I want the students to have knowledge on this particular course. All right. So I will map it with my first program learning outcome, which mentioned that the first program learning outcome is for knowledge. Suppose like my second course learning outcome, I want the student to have some sort of a practical skills. And my practical skills comes under the second program learning outcome. I will map it here. All right, so that will be my second course learning outcome, map it with my program learning outcome, which is actually for practical skill. Now, let's say my third course learning outcome is for more on, let's say, I am, looking at the communication skills of the students, right? Now, in my program learning outcome, let's say my program learning outcome is emphasizing on the communication skills, then I will map it my communication skills. All right. So now when I get this course learning outcome for this particular course, I know what are the program learning outcome that we are mapping with. I know the first learning outcome is for knowledge and understanding. The second one is actually more on a practical skills. And the third course learning outcome is actually looking into the communication skills. All right. So, and then we also have an extra column here looking into
Sir, can you
what
just
type of
zoom it a little bit to 100%? I think someone wants it to be a little enlarged.
oh, sorry, man. Sorry, man. Sorry, man. Yeah, allow me. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, thank
It's too small. Is it okay now?
you. Yeah, it's okay.
It's okay. Okay. Now, this template is not the D template and the rightful template. No, but this is what has been given by the framework. We follow this, and all the faculties will have to follow this. And of course, we also modified here and there to suit our thing, but that we will keep it for our use. But when we submit the document for accreditation, we will use this. So here, what I'm trying to say is that I am trying to map the course to the program learning outcome. Why it is important? Because later on, being a faculty, we want all the courses, at least to a certain extent, map with all the learning outcome. Now, if you are doing it silo for a course, let's say anatomy course, you are developing the content, you already know what is the course learning outcome, you map it with this learning outcome because the program learning outcome was already given to you. That will be framed earlier. It will be given to you. You actually, map it with the course learning outcome. So what happened is that later on, when you get all the courses, all right, all the courses, I think I will stop this and then I'll go to the next one. Yeah, just give me 1 minute. Okay. All right. So this is what I mentioned just now. For you can have a more specified one based on the course. Let's say you have name of the course and then year or semester which is being offered, whether it's a compulsory or elective, what is the credit value? 3 credit, 4 credit, 2 credit, depends. If it's a term-based, most likely they don't have a credit value, but that's okay. Then you are mapping it. All right. So once you already map it, then at the end of the day, what will happen is that you will have this. Right? Let me put it into presentation mode. We will have this. Now, these are the program learning outcome. All right, for the program. What is program learning outcome? Is the intended outcome that we want the student to achieve upon completion of the program. All right. So now we have course number 1. I just showed to you Excel template. For one course, there is actually 3 learning outcomes. So for course number 1, it is actually mapping with my program learning outcome 1, program learning outcome 2, program learning outcome 3. Now, likewise, my course number 2 will have mapping with program learning outcome 1, program learning outcome 2, and program learning outcome 5. So what is program learning outcome 1? We are talking about knowledge and understanding. So we write down the program learning outcome using the correct verb for knowledge and understanding. The second one, the knowledge and understanding in this context will be more on a lots, lower order thinking skill. For the second program learning outcome, we emphasize on critical thinking and problem solving skills. So therefore, we go for higher order thinking skills, HOTS. So we are mapping course 1 with that. And then the third one, we're looking at the practical skills. So likewise, when you have all the courses with the number of the course learning outcome, then you have to map it with all the program learning outcome. Now, at the end of the day, when you look at it holistically, you will see that all your program learning outcome has been ticked, meaning to say that this cohort, let's say, for example, for this program, there's only 15 courses. I'm just very optimistic. Normally, it will be about 40 to 50 courses. So 15 courses, when you look at it, we have actually ticked with all the program learning outcome. So in a way, we look at it that when these students or particular cohort go through the entire courses here or the program, at the end of the program, upon completion, they will have acquired whatever skills that we want them to have. All right. So this is where this, what you call the mapping will come into important aspect. All right. Now, if you look at it, PLO1, PLO2, normally we will have this more for the earlier level courses, maybe year 1, year 2. But when we move on, progressing to the next level, year 3, year 4, and year 5, of course, you will have this PLO 1, PLO 2, or C in terms of knowledge and understanding and cognitive skills. You may have more of this coming into picture. All right. More tick will be there for all of these in the later years as compared to the earlier years of the program. All right. So who will do this mapping? The curriculum committee will do the mapping. Who will do the course learning outcome generation? The subject matter expert or experts will do that. At the end of the day, they will give that to the faculty curriculum committee. The curriculum committee will actually put it into this framework, and then they will see. Now, suppose in case if you don't have any of these learning outcome, there's no tick. Now, this is where the intervention of the curriculum committee will come into picture. They will actually decide that particular course need to have that. All right. So we will go back and then negotiate with that particular course content developer. We will tell them that, look, I look at it, this particular anatomy course, you put in so many other things, but there's no practical skills. I think there's a better if you can put in into the practical skills, because there's no practical skills in other subjects. All right. So now most of the time this will not be the case, because the subject matter expert, they will know what are the things that students need to have at the end of the course. So they will somehow or other they will actually have it. All right. And then when you write down all this learning outcome, you already have it. Next thing is what? All right. So we ensure that the course learning outcome has been mapped with our program learning outcome. Now, are we done with that? No. We go back. Let me go back. Before we move on to the course learning outcome to program learning outcome mapping, you need to map your program learning outcome with program educational objective. No point you develop the program learning outcome. At the end of the program, the student need to achieve these competencies or these skills or these outcomes and all that. But at the end of the day, after 5 years down the line, whether the student will able to, apply whatever they learn is where the program educational objective will come into picture. So you still have to tick your program learning outcome. Let's say 11 program learning outcome, you can actually tick it with your program educational objective. Now, often we will see that, more number of program learning outcome, less number of a program educational objective. Some of it will be overlap. Maybe my program learning outcome will overlap with PO1 and maybe PO2. Maybe my PLO2 will be overlap with PO2 and PO3. That's okay. That's okay. All right. But if you want to be more specific, then you have to critically look into your program educational objective. But there in our mind, our program educational objective should be aligned with our what they call vision and mission of the university. Right. Okay. So now, once we already have it, then we can go into this table where we wanted to determine, the assessment, whether the assessment we're going to conduct, the written examination, or it is actually probably maybe like we give them practical tests and all that. All right. So I will touch a little bit on that now. Let me take you through. Okay. So this is actually the empty template. All right. So if we can have this, that will be rather easier for us to do the mapping. If not, we will find it a little difficult, right? So let's say my course that I'm going to develop the content, assuming this is actually biochemistry course, all right? So in biochemistry course, I'm going to have my course learning outcome mentioned about on the knowledge, on the cognitive skills, and interpersonal skills. Now, my knowledge and cognitive skills are categorized under the cognitive domain under the Bloom and also Bloom taxonomy. My interpersonal skills is more an affective domain. I already identify the learning domain. The next thing is that the learning outcome. All right. So here I've taken example of radiology, but anyway, it's just to give you a glimpse of it. So I write down the course learning outcome, and then I write down the course learning outcome for cognitive skills for PLO2, and then I write down for the affective. So once already done it, and then we go for identifying which level in Bloom that particular CLO course learning outcome comes in. So here, the first course learning outcome comes under the C2 category. C2 is more on comprehension. So when you frame the question for this, it has to be revolving around the comprehension, all right? And then my cognitive skills for the PLO2 or course learning outcome goes into more on a C5, all right? So C5, we'll have to have the C5 verb, correct verb should be used. And then my effective domain, if you look at the different, attributes, it goes into A3, all right? And then you list down the topics where it is, goes into knowledge. What are the topics? Then you list down. And what is the teaching and learning method? That will be using lecture. And then move on to the hours that you are putting in. So for lecture hours, face-to-face is 3 hours. For 3 hours of a lecture, the student need to have over 6 hours of learning time. That is independent learning time or non-face-to-face learning time. The total SLT will be 9 hours for that particular chapter of functional anatomy. Likewise, for image and quality processing chapter or topic, we spend about 1 hour lecture. For 1 hour lecture, the student need to have 2 hours of independent learning or non-face-to-face learning. The total hours for the particular topic will be 3 hours. Now, how do we determine whether it is 6 hours needed for 3 hours of lecture, 4 hours needed for 2 hours lecture? It all depends on how the university or faculty would like to frame. Our university, we have a framework, so we follow the framework. For every 1 hour of a lecture, the desired learning time for the student, independent learning time will be 2 hours. If it is difficult chapters, maybe 1 hour of lecture, maybe 3 hours of a learning time. If it is a very simple lecture, 1 hour can go to 1 hour as well of independent learning. All right. So we write down for the what do you call the learning student learning time. For this one, for knowledge, for cognitive part will be 60 hours. For our the second course learning outcome, you will see that total is actually 8 hours, right? And then the last one for the effective domain will be 12 hours. Now, how do you derive this? Now, the third one is actually interpersonal skills effective. So it has to be a group work. So group work, you don't, determine, assess through examination. We don't do that mistake. We don't assess the group work. The group work is actually a skill. We determine through a group activities. We give them a group activities. Suppose like, problem-based learning, for example, you give them some kind of a scenario. There's a group activity taking place. Then you assess a student in terms of group activities. In that group activities, you want to determine the leadership. So our learning outcome is more focused on the leadership qualities of the student. Then, therefore, we allocate the time for that group activity to take place and how much time the student need to take. So likewise, we have the total learning time, which is 80. And then the weightage will be determined based on the hours spent for that particular course learning outcome. Suppose like 60 hours is spent for the first course learning outcome, all right? Then 60 over 80 will determine the total percentage. The total percentage for that particular learning outcome is 70. And then for the second learning outcome, out of 8 over 80, so it will be 10% will be allocated. And then for the effective domain, it is about 20%. So it will goes down to 30%. Now, often, sometimes, when we teach, we have a lecture hours, we directly pretty fix, okay, final examination is 60%, that your continuous assessment is 40%. You don't decide like that for OB-based curriculum, because OB-based curriculum boils down to the course learning outcome. When you do the mapping, you will know what is the actual time spent for that particular learning outcome. Accordingly, the weightage will vary. So for course to course, the assessment weightage will vary. You cannot pretty fix like, continuous assessment is 40% and then final examination is 60%. It depends on what type of learning outcome you're looking at it, all right? Okay, so that will be the main thing. How to assess the PO, PLO, and CLO, I think I already mentioned. PLO, we will have a set of tools. We will check how the attainment will be achieved. So I will directly move into that. All right, I think 2 hours time is already about there. All right, let me move on to the how we do really determine the attainment of the students, right? Okay, so what we have done in our faculty and our university is a bit of sharing. So we have come out with a simplified Excel template to determine the students' achievement. All right. Suppose like I have a 3 course learning outcome. The 3 course learning outcome is mapped with the 3 different program learning outcome. So when I say 3 different program learning outcome, I'm talking about the attributes or the skills the student will achieve after the completion of the program, right? So let's say I have this course, which is mapped with PLO1, PLO2, and PLO6. All right. So what normally we will do is that we break down the CA component, right, and then final examination component, and then in the final examination component, what are the things that we are mapping with? Let's say we are talking about knowledge and understanding and some sort of a problem solving skills. So you want to test that using examination. So that is mapped with PLO1. Let's say your practical component of this course, testing the practical aspect of it, then is mapped with PLO2. So accordingly, based on the weightage, you can actually key in the marks here. So practical component gives about 20%. Let's say my mid-semester examination, I'm giving 15% based on the mapping with my program learning outcome of PLO1. All right. The final examination boils down to only PLO1. Right. So likewise, if I can share with the actual template, maybe we can get a better understanding. All right. If you look at it for this course, I'm sorry that I'm sharing some of the names. These are the student names. So just ignore the student name and then the metric number. Yeah. All right. So this is a template created in such a way that at the end of the day, we will see that the program learning outcome 2, program learning outcome 6 for this particular batch, for this particular course has been derived. All right. So here, there's one thing is missing. Maybe I need to add in marks. Let's say all right. So this is actually a template that we have developed, to identify whether the particular course, whether the achievement has been, the student achieved the particular achievement now, or in terms of percentage. So when we look at it, these are the, just give me a minute. You can follow my cursor, right? So if you look at it, we have a CA component, we have a final examination component. So in the final examination component, you will have a different breakdown. All right. You have different questions, you have maybe like 5 MCQs or 10 MCQs, maybe 5 SAQs, 5 long questions and all that. But all that will be giving you a value here. So when you key in the marks in your final examination, whatever mark that you key in my template, automatically it will show up here. All right. So here, at the end of the session, once you key in the marks, after you do the assessment for the students, you will see the program learning outcome 1 for this course, which is mapped with CLO1. This is CLO2. This is my CLO3, which is mapped with PLO6 has been given. So at the end of the day, for PLO1, for this batch, this course, they only achieve 40%. For this is actually understanding and knowledge, right? Now, PLO2 is actually my practical skills. In my practical skills, for this course, the student achievement is about 85%. And then PLO6, suppose, is actually communication skill. For this course, the achievement of the cohort for this course is actually about 60%. All right. So I already have my course learning outcome, which I map with my program learning outcome. I know that, the student's achievement in terms of program learning outcome. But again, I have almost like about 50 courses in my program. In my 50 courses program, where do I stand? Where do the students stand? Where does the cohort stand? Now, this is where we come into another, what we call as a cumulative, program learning achievement. So let me take you all through again. I have my program educational objective. I map with my program learning outcome. And then I have course learning outcome. I already mapped with my program learning outcome. So now I am actually taking the student achievement through various assessment strategies. I'm trying to putting into this template here. All right. So assuming this is actually for pharmacy, which I developed, but this is actually developed by me for the university, and they are actually using this template for their usage. All right. This is not pretty fixed, but you can actually always change. Let's say for introduction to pharmacy, it is actually mapped with the 3 different learning outcomes. Let's say the course learning outcome mapped with program learning outcome, and then course learning outcome 2 mapped with program learning outcome 3, and then course learning outcome 3 mapped with program learning outcome 4. So let's say for the cohort just now, if you if I can go back again, all right? For if I look at it, now this is actually the percentage achievement for program learning outcome, which is mapped with course learning outcome. So when I go into my cumulative for my program learning outcome, this will be my 40% because the student achievement for this course is actually 40%. For PLO3, the achievement is about 6 or maybe like 80%. For PLO4, when I key in the marks, if you look at the chart here, for PLO4 for that, which is mapped with CLO3 for that course, let's say the percentage achievement is 90. So when it's 90, if you look at it, the cohort for after completion of this particular course, this will be the achievement. If likewise, in a semester, let's say I have 3 courses, I just key in the marks for the learning outcome. If you look at it, when I key in 90 marks, that program learning outcome 6, there's a bar chart, right? When I key in 90. So this is what you get. So at the end of the day, what will happen is that when you progressively look into the students, and you add in the percentage achievement for that particular learning outcome, you will have a comprehensive outcome here. All right. So there will be a committee to work on this to check. After every semester, you look at.
We can't see the cursor. I can't see the cursor in the graph that you've been showing, sir.
The graph is not being seen here. Okay, let me stop and share again. Are you able to see the graph here? Do you see the Excel template, Prof. Inuta?
Yes, sir.
You can see that bar chart here, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You can see. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is that we are actually we are already assessing the student based on the courses. So once the course is over, you take the values that the student achieved based on the template that I shared just now. You can have a different way of doing it, but you can actually put that into this cumulative template. So let's say 5 courses the student already completed up to here. All right, that's for semester 1. So when you key in all these percentage here, that will give you an indication on the learning outcome for that particular semester that the student achieved. Now, suppose like, in semester 1, the PLO1 is actually, let's say, it is still for PLO1 is about, they have not taken the, what do you call the average of it. The average of it will be still 40%. If the average is still 40%, then you need to know that, the student have not achieved because our minimum is actually 50%. Then we go back and then check where we have actually gone wrong. Now, this is where the CQI will come into place. Sorry, I'm just have to rush in. Now, this is where the CQI will come into place. Now, able to see my PPT?
No, sir. The Excel is still here.
Now, able to see?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if you look at it, this is actually our the CQI cycle. CQI cycle is very important in outcome-based education because you're looking into whether the student achieved the learning outcome or not. So let's say in the previous semester or in the previous term, you analyze the CLOs based on the template that I showed, and then you identify the weakness, and then you suggest the improvement measures. And then what will happen is that you will have to compile everything. You have to compile everything that will be given to the next course coordinator who will be coordinating the course if it is a different person. All right. So in a different person, if it is a different person, he will look into the weakness of that course for that particular cohort, for that batch, for that year. And then when the new batch comes in, you know that weakness, you go in you change the weakness, you identify, I mean, you try to do modify here and there, you improvise, maybe some, addition need to be made, you add that, and then you change it. All right, you change, you implement the changes, and then you see whether there's an improvement or not. If there's an improvement, good, you can maintain. The curriculum can be maintained because you see that the cohort able to achieve particular percentage. If let's say there's no improvement after you've gone through one cycle, then you implement some changes, go to the next cycle for the next batch, still there's no improvement, then you have to go back to the CQI, do amendment to the curriculum, not to the curriculum per se, maybe your course learning outcome is not being assessed accordingly, maybe the verb that we are using is not proper, maybe that, the assessment method is not good, maybe our assessment blueprint, there's something wrong with it, and this is where you do modification. So once you do the modification, and then you implement again into the next cohort, and then you see the changes. If the changes are there, there's improvement, the cohort achievement is being improved, then well and good. Then the curriculum can be implemented until end of the cohort, and finally you go for the final cumulative, sorry. So you will go into the final cumulative of the program learning outcomes. So if at the end of the day, if you have the learning outcome for all, let's say I keep writing for all. All right. So this will give an indication at the end of the day, the cohort has achieved this learning outcome. If you look at it, I mean, is this Excel template is able to view this Excel?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So if you look at it, this will give you an indication that this cohort, before they graduate, for their program learning outcome, the achievement level is 80%. So I can proudly say that we have implemented OBE curriculum, and the cohort, entire cohort, they achieve about 80% of the intended learning outcome for the knowledge and understanding. Of course, that another 20% where you can improve. So once the cohort is graduated out, major curriculum revision you can take, then you can improve, in terms of their knowledge and understanding, then you can do the improvisation. For PLO2, it's also 80%. But when I look at it, all the learning outcome, more or less the student achieve it, except the last PLO where the achievement for the cohort is only 50%. And we can say that, at the end of the program, this particular cohort only achieved 50% for this particular program learning outcome, suppose like so that means to say that you have to go back after the cohort is graduated out, do the curriculum revision, and ensure that the curriculum revision, there is an element of the particular learning outcome, say, suppose communication skill, you have to emphasize more on the communication skills so that, in the next cohort, they will be able to achieve the communication skills. Now, how do we assess the communication skill? How do we assess the other affected domain? It boils down to the university's policies and how you want to assess them based on the required, what you call, guidelines. All right, so let me move on to the last part of it. I think I've taken enough time.
Yes, sir. We can.
Yeah, I think I can wind up.
Yeah.
I hope that, there are quite a few things that I would like to share, but maybe I can share with the slides. In a nutshell, OB curriculum or OB outcome-based education is purely, depend on what is the outcome that you want the student to achieve. How you want to, frame the curriculum is depend on the faculty or the university. But nevertheless, I think the outcome should be in our mind before we draft the curriculum. And of course, there must be a proper assessment strategies, because at the end of the day, we want to see whether the cohort is actually achieved that intended learning outcome or not. If it is not achieved, then there must be a proper work need to be done again by the faculty or the university to come out of the framework or kind of policies, so that all the faculties follow that policies, and then you can do the CQI to improvise the curriculum. All right. So I'm not sure whether I've actually delivered to the required intended outcome for today. Maybe maybe that participant, you can ask any question if you feel that I need to do some clarification and all that. So I think, Prof, I think I can stop here. I think the lunch hour in India, I've taken my lunch anyway. So I just stop here, Prof. If any question, I'll be more than willing to answer, Prof. Thank you one and all for your kind patience and, listen to, 2 hours of my blabbering and all that. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, sir. It was so like, it's coming from the horse's mouth, like, because you've done so much, the process and the way it can be implemented, it did not limit itself to just being offered in a nutshell. It was quite extensive, and as we have been in the process, we were able to grasp what was happening, and we got the necessary inputs. And we would love to have further interactions with you, sir, for small chunks where we think we need a little bit more of hand-holding. And basically, I think there is one question from our Director Academics, if you have time, if you could spare 2 minutes, sir, that is regarding indirect assessments, like what's the role of these indirect assessments? So you're muted, sir.
Now, we have an indirect assessment, like, for example, we have an exit survey and also entrance survey. Now, entrance survey, normally we will conduct before the student enroll into the program. Okay, so this is actually indirect way of assessing the students in how far they are actually having the knowledge, or maybe how far they have the skills, and that will be conducted through the entrance survey. So before our students, register to our program, when they come in during the orientation week, we will distribute some entrance survey exit. The student will give us the feedback. What is their level? Some question we will post to the student, and we will know that this is the level of the student. And then once the program is over, that means after 5 years or maybe 4 years, we will give them an exit survey. Now, this exit and entrance survey is actually indirect assessment to know whether the student has achieved the intended learning outcome that we have actually want them to have. Entrance survey will give us an intimation. Exit survey, at the end of the day, we will know, okay, we have actually delivered, the student more or less already achieved these skills. But of course, through the direct assessment, we will know the percentage. The student will have, okay, the achievement is 90%. The achievement of the cohort is 90%. But if you boils down, individual student also you can determine. Individual student percentage of achievement for that particular program learning outcome can also be determined. So this is a indirect learning assessment, Prof. I hope that I answered the question.
Yeah, Shazia wants to know, how do you calculate CLO? Is there a tool, she's asking? Percentage of CLO.
Yes. Yeah, we have, I shared some, what you call the Excel file just now. We can actually create a simplified Excel file. I can share that whatever file that I have with me, I can share with all of you. You can look at it. The CLO, when we, drop the CLO, let's say we have 3 CLOs, and then we narrow it down for CLO1. What is the percentage of weightage? That is some calculation. And then there's an Excel calculation also there. You can actually put in the total student learning time, and then it will automatically calculate for you the percentage weightage. It will calculate for you. Okay, so we have spent about almost like 20 hours of a lecture, 5 hours of a tutorial for this particular course, and for this particular learning outcome, this many number of hours have been allocated. Based on that, the weightage will be automatically calculated for you. All right, and then we also want some of the topics which we teach them in a lecture. We also use that lecture for the students to do some presentation, because during the presentation, although the students have gone through the lecture hours, we want to test the probably the communication skills of it. So when the student do the presentation, we don't really test their knowledge, because the knowledge has been tested in the examination. So for that communication skill, we will have a separate rubrics for the communication skills. So based on the rubrics, we will assess, but not the knowledge. Even if you break the rubrics, in the rubrics we have attributes. So in the attributes, one of the attributes, maybe you can write down something to do with knowledge, but that percentage of that knowledge attribute shouldn't be higher or more as compared to the other attributes related to the communication skills. So often what will happen is that we will assess the student knowledge in the presentation, but actually the presentation is to test the communication skills of the student, not the knowledge of the student, because the knowledge of the student has been tested in examination. Why you want to test the knowledge of the student in the the presentation? So this is how, yes, we do have a Excel template. There is a Excel template tool to calculate it. We actually developed it in-house, Prof.
Oh, that's very interesting. So having indigenous method, getting involved in the whole process gives you a fair idea about, rather than have ready to use template. So that was the thing that actually got me drawn towards your talk when I attended your session. Your experience in designing this and creating this template and putting things in place. So that gives us a fair idea as to how exactly we can do this entire process. It's quite rigorous, but I think the way you have explained with a little bit of team and understanding that percolates to every faculty, because a lot of things are in place. Only thing is like trying to link each one is where faculty of our universities, academic institutes are actually trying to grapple with. I would like Dr. K.N.V. Prasad, and there's one more question. Do you see a role of artificial intelligence in trying to do this is one question, like do you use any machine learning or something like that?
So far we have not used Prof, but we have actually constituted a committee here who actually looking into the AI aspect of it. And if we can, link our tools with the AI and all that, probably I think it will be easier. It'll be easier to come out and develop with some sort of a software or something like that, where you just feed in the marks and automatically everything will be done for
Yes.
you. And
Yes.
you can actually, because there's also another question. The learning capabilities of the student, individual student, is actually multifactorial, meaning to say that every student have a different level of learning capabilities, right? So do we really measure them within these two? Partly yes, partly no. If it is partly yes, because we are measuring the capability, learning capability of the cohort. But as I said, we also can go narrow it down to individual student. You can also check the individual student learning capabilities. Maybe that particular student, achievement for a particular learning outcome is only 40%, but the cohort achievement is maybe about 60%. We cannot say the individual student, achieve 60%, but in actual case, it's only 40%, but the cohort is actually 60%, right? So this is where an intervention program can be used for that particular group of students who actually not really, meet the minimum requirement for the achievement. So we can actually have that also.
Now, for that particular batch, where the cohort or the minimum marks were not achieved, what you said you will look at the competence and then make some changes in the curriculum. But what do you do for that particular batch? How do you correct it?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Okay. So before the student graduate out, there will be after final semester of the examination of the final year, we will know the achievement of the cohort. Now, suppose that particular cohort is lacking with some skills. So before the convocation, we will have about 3 months duration, sir. So during the 3 months duration, we will try to have a short courses where it carries certain skills, and then it's like a crash course. We will ensure that the student at least achieve certain level before they conclude the entire session for their convocation. So the 3 months period is very important to do intervention. We look at it holistically and check which area that the student needed. Suppose like the cohort does not have what do you call the communication skill for that matter. The whole cohort, the percentage is 40%. Then for the 3 months duration, we will have a crash course or a design, pre-designed course where they will only look into the communication aspect of it. But that's what if you can follow the progress over the semesters, then you will slowly do the intervention so that you don't have that difficulties when they in the final year, sir. So the intervention program is not at the end of the program, but periodically after the semester or term is over. So that will be helping. Otherwise, you will be too late. If you don't have the time, the cohort will go out with less of those particular skills.
Yeah, that's what, because if you take it at the end, there may not be enough time to correct them within that 3 months. So the corrective measures should happen as and when the evaluation is done. So instead of
Yes.
waiting, you can make
Exactly,
the
sir.
change in the curriculum, but that will be for the batch coming in. But for that particular batch,
Yes.
corrective measures should be in place so that you don't have to wait till the final year for
And-
them to give the thing.
Yes, sir. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, you're right, sir. You're right. So it boils down to the batch coordinator. If you have one, the
Ah.
batch coordinators in our case, they will do that every semester. And then if they look at it in that particular semester, the achievement for that particular learning arm is lesser, then we will trigger the other coordinator when they move on to the year 3, that this particular cohort, the achievement is lesser. So you have to pay emphasis more on this and then try to do something so that they can actually achieve the learning outcome in that level. Or some intervention program between the year 2 and year 3, sir. There's a gap over 3 months before they progress to next year. We will have short courses so that the student get the what do you call the skills. It will not be for all the students, but for maybe selected group of students, because we have the learning outcome for individual students as well. So we will only call those students, and then we will make sure that they also they get the benefit to improve their skills. Yeah.
Now, this is so
Thank you,
much demanding. Do you, your opinion on how much the faculty should be trained to adequately incorporate
well,
this
sir,
program into the
yeah.
curriculum?
Yes, sir. I think we had, when we asked to introduce the OBE curriculum, the first 3 years was actually nightmare for all of us. The first 3 years, sir, was nightmare because we didn't manage to write the proper CLOs. Everything was like haywire. So we invited the experts, and eventually for every year we had a talk. Every semester we had a talk. We invite them, and slowly we learn. And then the external examiners played an important role in our faculty, sir, because external examiners are the ones who have this been implemented in the public university. Being a private university, in any case, I don't know about India, we are the last one to receive then the public university, So the public university, they have the benefit of it. We invite them. They come and they actually came, and then coaches. We had about 3 years of training, and God grace, I think all of us now, some or other know they know what how to do and about it, sir. So I would say I can say that about 1 year will be minimum, sir, for them to get trained fully for this achievement analysis, sir.
That with repeated